Are you done with the laser pointer in your
Yes.
nose and your teeth and all that stuff?
That's a fancy laser pointer. How long have you had that?
Wow.
Yeah. He made it
For
himself.
what?
To use for my seminars.
Oh. Don't point that at people's eyes, you
It's
idiot.
at his mouth.
Okay.
It's close to his eyeballs.
It ain't gonna
All
hurt.
right.
That's a myth.
Didn't you go to 3rd grade?
Yeah, and it's a
So-
myth. It ain't gonna burn your eyes.
Well, I'd rather not find out.
no kidding.
Okay.
All right.
But point it at your own eye.
I just did. I'm good.
You could
Okay.
actually, if there's anybody to test it on, it'd probably be all right to try your right eye right
Are
now.
we going to start this podcast
Sorry.
now or not? Huh?
Looks like he's got pink eye over there.
You shoot it with a laser.
All right. Don't laugh at them, Nick. You're just egging them on. This is not appropriate talk for a podcast or anything other kind of cast. Okay, so welcome everyone to Raised Hunting's podcast. I have no idea what you're gonna have just heard, but I do this when I meet new people anywhere that I go. I just say, look, man, I want to apologize now, and then I introduce them to my kids, and that apology covers everything. Okay, so I just have no idea what they're going to say or do, so I'm just going to say, hey, man, I'm really sorry.
Man, you really raised us good.
He
Yeah.
had no idea he was being so creative when I was made.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I came
anyhow,
out like a
today we're going to
tie-dye.
– would you shut up? So today we are
The point
going
is
to talk
talking.
about shot placement, which shouldn't be a controversial topic, but, man, holy cow, if you go on the internet, it's quite the topic.
Yeah,
From shot angles to where you're aiming, how far. I mean, there's a lot of factors. The animal that you're hunting, there's a lot of different factors that factor into making a good shot on an animal. I guess at the end of this, I hope that what we all get out of this is that we are killing animals. I understand that, and I think every hunter understands that, but we need to try to do that in the most humane and ethical way possible. So regardless of the outcome, we're trying to make that outcome happens as painless and quickly as possible for that animal. They deserve that. So with that, I'll open it up and say, let's talk a little bit about shot placement. We've got a diagram here that we'll kind of be referring to, and for those folks that will be able to see the podcast, it might help them, but we'll try to describe
it on
things the best we
YouTube,
can.
too,
Yeah,
with
where we can describe
Some
what we're
extra
talking about.
visual aid.
Well, you'll be able to see it on Spotify as well.
Yep.
Yeah, with this one, we're going to try and make it a little more visual for you guys because this actually came from you guys. So thank you for asking us questions because that's the whole reason we're doing this one is we had a couple people after the Broadhead podcast that we referred to a few things that I think confused some people. So one thing I think that we could honestly start with, we say it's not controversial, but at the same time, when you think about it, I think probably the number one, I don't know if the word is wounder. The number one reason animals are wounded is probably just because of the shots people take.
Oh,
Yeah.
Not necessarily the distance or their shot ability or anything else. It's just,
poor shot angles.
yep.
And so here's where I would come from, and I can't speak for these two, so maybe that starts controversy between us, but there's only 2 shots that we should be taking when it comes to a whitetail deer, and that's broadside or quartered away. I guess you could slightly include a quarter two, but I mean, I'm talking so slight that is really still broadside. I've met a lot of people that will take that quarter two shot, and I am one of them. I did it, and mine was on an elk. And the day that I did that and said, okay, all I got to do, the bull had come running in. I had 5 days into the hunt. I'm like, oh boy, I got to kill an elk here. And he stops at 8 yards, 9 yards, not broadside. He didn't make it to broadside, but he's facing me. So he's pretty severely quartering too. And I'm at full draw. All I got to do is let down or not. And I talked myself into, if you just put this right behind his shoulder, right where, because you can pinpoint this to the absolute hair where you want to put it there, you'll kill this bull. And I talked myself into it. I released that arrow, and that bull died. He was found dead 2 weeks later on the adjoining ranchers. I did not kill that bull. I did not recover that bull. And
You did
since
kill
then,
it, you just didn't recover
I did kill it. But
What bull was that?
just a small raghorn bull. I mean, I didn't get the rack back or anything like that. I just know that they found it because it still had my arrow in it.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine, the fire chief from Lewistown, Montana, is the one that was able to tell me that he called me and said, "Hey, what color were your fletchings?" And I told him, and he said, "Yeah, they did find that bull." And so that was the place where, and that's been close to 30 years ago or 25 years ago. And from that point forward, I said, I'll never do it again. I don't care how big the animal is. I don't care how many days I got into the hunt or whatever it is. I won't do that again. That animal deserved better, because I don't know how long he lived. All I can tell you is that he went 1.5 miles at least, because that's how far I could follow him. And
Do you think you got a lung or just straight guts?
I might have got one lung.
One lung, no liver, obviously.
No liver.
Yeah.
Arrow went in probably 12 inches, 12, 15 inches.
I think that's what kind of brought this whole discussion up of the argument is, I think there's a lot of these guys that are doing the whole 500 to 700 grain arrow thing strictly for the purpose to take shots like that are quartered to or facing them, to try to, blow through the shoulder. I don't care how many grains you put on your arrow. You shoot an elk in the front shoulder, you're not getting enough penetration. I would love for anybody to show me video of shooting clean through a shoulder. And that's where I think the discrepancy comes up is, and this is not, it's not an attack on anybody, because we just realized this less than probably, a year ago?
Yeah, if that.
Ourselves, that what people think is the shoulder is not actually the shoulder.
Well, you got to make sure you clarify, because people can't see. When you talk about the entire shoulder is not a solid bone like the shoulder leg. That bone is
I think
unbelievably dense.
Yes, that's what. So to try to describe this for everybody that can't see the video, when you're looking at just a deer broadside and the leg comes up, there's a knuckle. Everybody knows where that knuckle is. From that knuckle, I think that a lot of people believe, and myself was included in this a long time, that up from that knuckle, basically straight up their spine, that whole thing is the shoulder blade, that whole thing is bone. Well, what we realized, and I don't even really understand how it took us so long to realize this. I don't know. Maybe we'll be the only ones that didn't realize it until just now.
Nobody's talking about it if they are.
Yeah, nobody is talking about it.
And everybody's teaching you where to shoot them back yonder.
Right. So the thing of that knuckle, above that knuckle is nothing. When I say nothing, meaning there's not bone material there. And then if you have a deer that's broadside and he's facing to the right, on top of that knuckle, to the right, and then up for probably 5 to 6 inches, and then back to the left, there's still no shoulder material there. So all these guys that are shooting at elk and shooting deer, and they're saying that they're blowing through both shoulders because they're right above that knuckle and to the right, they're not blowing through shoulders. They're just shooting. They're shooting.
It's the cartilage. There. There is something there. It's part of the
ribs,
but it's not bone.
It's not
solid
a plate.
bone. It's not an inch bone thick.
Right. So I think a lot of these guys think that they're getting this penetration of, I'll show you. I shot through a bull through both front shoulders, and then if you look at it, no, you didn't. You didn't shoot through the shoulders because the shoulder isn't there. If you hit this, and what I'm pointing to is the very front part of that shoulder, or the knuckle, or the top plate of the shoulder, and you blow through that, then I'd be pretty impressed, because that's freaking hard.
Really hard.
Yeah. The knuckle especially.
Is the argument whether they can get a pass through the shoulder or?
Yeah, blowing through both shoulders. I think that you could get enough penetration through one shoulder.
Definitely kill one still.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I believe that you can do that, but shooting through both of them, I would like to see that, see some video of that where you can show me that it hit both shoulders on an elk. On a deer, I think it's still, I won't like it at all, but
some big
the
Iowa
shoulder
bucks,
plate, I think, is much easier to go through than like the actual one of the actual bones, whether it's the diagonal. Yeah,
I don't know, dude. I shot that doe 2 years ago.
In the plate, or didn't? I thought it hit the joint.
No, right there, and I got a few
at an
inches.
Angle. It was at an angle.
Yeah, it was at an angle.
I think it's gonna be a little stronger.
And that was because I was shooting a 500 grain arrow. Now I don't know if that was the reason, but I hit her high and hit that shoulder plate, and I got a few inches of penetration. Got really lucky, and I poked one long, and she killed her. But that was the first one that I've probably actually legitimately hit in that shoulder plate, and I was shocked at the minimal amount of penetration. But at that time too, I was only the limbs on my bow were only 62 pounds or something for some reason. So I was only pulling 60 some, but still it was amazing. I think that my whole point is I don't care what arrow setup that you're making. You shouldn't be building that arrow setup to try to be able to take a quartering to
relying
or
on your
shot.
equipment to take either a bad shot to compensate for it, or even just having your equipment set up so that you can not worry about making a bad shot.
Right. But I do think, to your point, as far as I'm willing to take a little bit more of a quartering to shot on a deer because of this knowledge now that I know.
Because you know you have room to get in there.
If I'm
blocking
confident
it.
enough in the shot and it's close enough, you need to move your mic when you keep hacking or whatever there, COVID boy. That nobody's going to listen to this because of you. Or I'm going to shove it so far down your throat that you can't do it.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, you're thinking about it.
I'm laughing.
Anyways, that gives you more room, a little bit more room now. If I was really confident in the shot and he was really close, I would be willing to take a slightly quarter two shot, but definitely not hard. I would have to, and I don't even know if I could. We may have to pull up the vital zone and show you exactly the amount that I'd be willing to go, because you can see it on most deer, pretty clear definition of that V that you can hit.
Well, I'm of the, having made the mistake that I've made before, and it was clearly my mistake. I'm not willing to that quarter two shot. I don't care what the situation is. I'm not taking it.
Well, the thing I think we could speak to real quick too for elk hunters, because we've been hunting a bunch of elk, is the frontal shot one that's stupid. It's stupid. I don't care what the discussion is. I know that there's guys out there teaching to take that shot. That's stupid.
Well, let's clarify. First of all, it's lethal.
Yeah,
if it's made correctly, it's lethal.
But your margin of error is slim to none, and there's no need to do it. If you do your setup properly, you shouldn't need to take a full frontal shot.
Absolutely. And so when one comes in, and the best way that I can describe that to someone is if you hold your hands up and you cup them facing each other, is you have a few inches there where the shoulders are facing you to shoot through. It's like and it's probably 3 or 4 inches wide and 6, 8, maybe 10 inches tall. There's lots of things in there. There's the jugular vein. You can get to the heart. But you can't get through both lungs because you're shooting straight on. The air,
you possibly could if they're inflated.
If they're inflated and your blades were exactly if you were dead center where you might clip both of them. But it's not a highly likely that that's going to happen. And that's saying that you make a perfect shot. The other part of that is if you're off by an inch left or right, either way, you are not killing that animal. You are going to wound him. You are going to I don't care whose bow it is, and I don't care how much penetration you think you have or how heavy your arrow is or what kind of broadhead you have, you're not penetrating the shoulder of a deer or an elk from straight on. It's not going to happen.
Well, and the thing with an elk, too, is we know a deer is one thing. You hit an elk, and you hit him not perfect like that, your chances of finding him are
slim,
probably like 10% or less, just because elk aren't like deer. They don't go and they bed somewhere and they don't move. They just keep going and going and going and going. And now you're trying to cover gigantic country looking for an elk, which, they're big, but when you're trying to cover 25 square miles, they're not that big.
All right, well, let's flip the deer around. So the straight on or head on shot is not a good one.
So let's do a little summary, though, then because that was, I think, the statement that we made on the last podcast that people were asking us questions on.
Yeah, and if we're confusing you, if you're listening to this podcast and you're confused on what this looks like, you'll be able to see what we're referring to on YouTube and in the use of our vital zone, and see that shoulder swings forward, whether the animal's facing right or left. It has an angle to it. It also, what we'll be able to show you is there is such a thing as a no man's land, which is another big controversy where there's some people out there saying there's no such thing. And I will tell you, I don't know how many animals I have seen shot and live from being hit high in the shoulder, which means they were above the shoulder, above the spine. They didn't go through anything. and you get blood
above the spine or below the spine.
Sometimes I think that it depends again on inspiration or exhalation. I think you could even be below the spine, go through there, and never touch the lungs.
That's what they're saying though, is that the lungs go all the way to the spine. So
yeah, and
so they're saying that there's no man's land that exists below the spine.
That may be correct, but I do think that it depends on inspiration or exhalation. The lungs inflate and then they decompress.
Yeah, but one thing to summarize here, because I think we should go right back to that. The thing that I was trying to summarize for you guys that we're saying that is so much different that may have thrown some of you off is that if you are like us and you traditionally believed that the shoulder was a whole plate that covered this entire front area from the knuckle up,
and you avoided it, you just see that crease and you're staying behind that crease.
Back of the leg up.
Or you're shooting at that knuckle or behind that knuckle, the knuckle is correct. You don't want to hit that knuckle. That what you think that is exactly what it is. That's a knuckle. You don't want to hit that. But if you go above that knuckle, and depending on which way the animal is facing, we're just going to say it's right so everybody can understand. Above that knuckle and to the right, there's a pretty decent area there that is not shoulder. There's no bone material other than ribs. If you can hit them in that, I mean, you're in by far the best area. That's why they teach you in Hunter Ed that quartered away is the best shot, because it gives you the most probability to get into that area without having to contend with the knuckle or anything else. Yes. But so back to your no man's land thing real quick. I feel like, and maybe we need to go look at some video, because I measured this on a deer he killed one year. I skinned the deer and measured him from what was the top of his back down to his spine. I can't remember exactly what the measurement was, but it wasn't very far. And I think that we have video of a couple deer that we've hit that were below that spine and above the lungs that we never found, or had pictures of them alive. And so I think what you're saying, the deer inhaling could matter. But the other thing I think that I've seen some of these guys say, well, look at this YouTube video. You can't argue with that, because they have a dead deer laying on the ground, and then they're filling the lungs up with an air compressor, and it goes to the spine. Well, I have two questions to that. So I guess I'm not making a statement here. I'm questioning it. One, that doesn't count for gravity. Does gravity pull the organs down at all? The weight of the organs. Now I understand that there's membrane and everything that holds them all in place, but does the weight of the heart and the lungs and everything, does that move it an inch or a half of an inch? Because maybe it's only a half-inch gap, and then does that matter on inhalation or inhaling and exhaling? Does that make a difference? And then the other thing about that is the one I saw with the guy filling it up with an air compressor. I want to do a
How do you know how much pressure to give it? Because
that's what my whole thing was. Is like
you could overpressure it really easily.
He was putting so much air in there. I was like, man, if they were that big all the time, you could shoot them in the rear and you're double lunging them. Yeah. So I don't know how you would know exactly how much air to put into that. So
how much pressure to put.
Well, I'm just going to go on record and say, there's a no man's land. You hit them high in the shoulder, high above the shoulder, and that deer runs off, I'm scared. Oh. And the reason that I'm scared is I've seen too many deer, too many elk that people have shot, including, I don't know that I'm trying to think of one that I might have shot there. I don't know of one. If I think of one, and there probably is, that I've made that mistake. But my point is, I know that the one that comes to mind is Alyssa shot the buck at the 80 that time.
Yes.
Hit it high. Deer's still alive today. I mean, that's been 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had good blood.
Well, we knew he wasn't going to die probably too, though, as soon as
But by our theory, he wasn't going to die. But by other people's theory is he has to die.
Well, that's what I'm saying we need to look at. We need to go back and look at all this video and we need everybody to define. Is no man's land mean that there's a space above the spine and to the top of the deer's back that it's not going to die? Well, in my opinion, obviously that's a no man's land, because there's nothing there to kill him. I think what everybody is trying to say, that no man's land is below the spine to the lungs, that there's no gap, that if your arrow enters underneath the spine, anywhere that it should be left or right, it's going to hit the lungs. That's what I think people are stating. And I would have to go back and look at the video, and I'd have to go find the measurements I made to see, because I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Well, the other one that I can think of now that I think about it was a videographer that we had that shot one, and I was the one filming him, and he shot it, and that had to be below the spine. It was 6-8 inches from the top of the deer's back.
See, it went down further than that, I think, though.
And that deer again lived. We had trail camera photos of it. That deer was absolutely okay. So anyhow,
this is kind of off topic. I don't know what he's looking at, but you know how when you're ever going to go to I'm asking this because I don't know what you think about it. We've discussed how we'll shoot further forward now because we know
as long as we hold higher,
a little higher. Yep, as long as we know, which I do for 3 years or 2 years now. Do you think that the whole theory behind African animals shooting further forward because their vitals are moved forward or sit further forward is exactly what we're discovering here? That's not necessarily the vitals sit further forward. They just know that the shoulder isn't there.
No, I think those animals are actually conditioned. I mean, I think that they're anatomically a little bit different to be able to handle the terrain and where they live and the heat.
Yeah.
Everything about them. It's like a bear. Someone needs to explain to me how come every bear you shoot, if you shoot a bear well, they don't go 30 yards, 40 yards.
Yeah.
They tip over. And I don't know if it's because they're fat and out of shape, and so they don't run very far. I don't know.
Too many gummy bears.
It's because their lungs proportionally to their body is smaller, or what is it? But when you hit one well, they don't go down. They go down right away.
Yeah.
You hit an elk really, really well, and even one that you double lung sometimes goes half a mile.
Yeah.
You know, so I think all these animals are built a little different, and I do think the African animals are pushed forward.
I'd like to look into that.
But
I would think so. It's a completely different region.
Okay.
Well, Warren's looking that up.
I found it. Okay, so you'd be correct there. So this was wasn't upside down. How do I make it not
lock
rotate?
Your phone.
Well, I want it to rotate.
Yeah,
and
rotate it, then lock your phone.
Okay. How do I?
I'm glad nobody's asked me to do that because I ain't locking nothing.
See, it moves it the wrong way. See what I'm saying?
Okay, so for those of you that can't see what's going on right now, Warren has found something that he wants to show us.
So I measured from when Easton killed. This whole conversation has been going on for years, obviously. And so when Easton killed his buck, I decided that I was going to measure from the top of the deer's back, where the hair ended, where the top of his back was, down to the top of his spine. So I cut the back straps out so I would know exactly where the top of the spine is. And then I measured from the top of the back to be able to tell exactly where the spine was and roughly how far down from the back did you need to be underneath the spine. Okay. Which I think that says like 3.5.
I was gonna say not quite 4 inches.
3.5, 4 inches. So, and then so you can also see I took pictures, and we'll put these in the podcast so that you guys can see them.
I'm holding that hide back.
So there you can see the spine.
Yep.
So I cut the back strap out so you can run the tape measure to the spine. So really, in theory, is what you're saying there is if you're 3.5 inches below the back, you're going to spine the deer. You're going to drop. I guess it probably varies a little bit on the size of the deer.
And if you hit something that is...
But anything beyond 3.5 inches below the spine...
is below the spine.
Right. You'd be below the spine, and you should technically...
kill that deer.
Yes. And I think that we've hit several deer, or have video or other people, where it was definitely 4 inches or more below the spine, or below the back, and did not find that deer.
Sure.
So now here's a question, though, because I heard several people stating this year, and we'll just see what you guys think. They were saying, and maybe this whole no man's land thing could attest to that if it's true. they were stating that a bunch of deer, not some, a bunch, were living off of one lung. That you're hitting a lung and the deer is living.
Mm-mm.
Do you think that the no man's land thing could be you're hitting one lung and they're living?
There's no way they're living on one lung.
What? I'm telling you, I mean, I would argue the same thing because I used to work in the fire service and I used to work on people that died. And when a person's lung collapses, you'd think it would kill them. However, I have seen with my own eyes someone who collapsed the lung, left the arrow in that animal, and shot that animal the next year. And the arrow was still there, and that deer did not have another lung. It had lived. And
was the arrow plug in the hole, though?
No, it was lodged in the spine. There was 8 inches. I could get those video. That's
what he's talking about, though. If it's still stuck in there, then it would be.
I don't. But there was, but the lung was
still can't
gone.
imagine that would even be.
Yeah,
enough.
I mean, over the course of the year, there was no lung there for this deer.
So I would be really curious to see then what is and I don't know how you would ever be able to get this metric other than by
why would someone
having tons and tons of people do autopsies on their deer. I feel as though I don't know that we've ever had a deer that, well, I guess if these no man's land bucks are one lung deer,
so we need to go hunt them
I'd say 90% of these deer with one lung are dying.
I mean, I think a lot of them die.
I guess my question is, how common could that be?
Again, we're not vets. I don't even know that a vet, you'd have to do a study and see how many.
The other thing that you do have to talk about, but I've only seen this once ever from thousands of people showing us deer and sending us pictures and stuff, was that guy that made a absolute perfect shot, and then the deer looked like a balloon. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I remember that.
So we had a guy that sent us in photos, and if you're out there, I apologize for forgetting your name, but thank you, because it's by far the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He hit that deer perfect, like right here.
Right.
Absolutely perfect. You could not have pointed on this deer and put the arrow in a better place. And so he shoots this deer, and then he gets trail camera pictures of him. I want to say it was the next day or maybe a few days later, and it looked like somebody had cut a hole in him and taken an air compressor and filled him up with a balloon. His whole face was swollen. Everything was swollen. He looked like a Michelin Man deer. And then they killed him 2 weeks later during the rifle season. So the deer lived, and I can't remember I think they looked, and I think that, I can't remember if he had hit both. I think he'd hit both lungs. And I would have never believed it unless he sent us he had the video of it and the photos and everything else. And the only thing I could figure, I need to go back and see, we need to try and get a hold of that guy and see if it was both lungs or if it was just one. The only thing that I could possibly figure is that somehow he hit both lungs, and then that the hide or the membrane managed to seal the hole, and all of his oxygen was filling his whole body up, which is what making him look like a balloon
instead of just the lungs.
It was insane. It was crazy. Yeah, I can't believe you don't remember that.
I do remember it, but I don't remember. I mean, I guess there's always going to be an anomaly, something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, 1 in a million type thing.
I mean, so what I would be trying to do though is for the norm, make the same shot that now with that guy making that shot, does that mean that he needs to go out and shoot him in a different spot? No.
No, yeah.
You can't do that. You need to kill him and shoot him in the same spot. And the one thing the reason why I said earlier, Easton, that's not going to change where I shoot, because I still aim at the lower third.
Yep.
I'm still aiming at right at the heart, even though I know that a better shot is to hit him in the lungs. I'm anticipating, this is on big game animals with 4 legs. I
just did this tip the other day too.
Well, I'm anticipating on them dropping. If they don't drop, I am going to go through the heart, and as far as I can tell, every time that we've cut the heart significantly, even with Mom's incident where she barely cut it, you kill them. So that's if my arrow goes exactly where I want. If I misjudge the yardage and I shoot under, then I don't kill them. I cut the brisket or I go completely underneath them and I have nothing to worry about. If they duck, as long as they don't duck more than 8 inches on a deer, probably, I still am going to kill that animal. My Oryx is probably one of the most prolific ones that you can watch. At 30 yards, she ducks. 8 or 10 inches, but she's big enough that she still doesn't get out of the way. The other thing is, here's an animal that's broadside. When it ducks, and I know anyone who's bow hunted for any length of time has seen this, you hit them in the broadside part of the shoulder or right behind the shoulder, but it lodges in the spine. You're like, well, how in the world is that possible? It is them ducking and rolling, and they can do it that fast. And this lodged in this oryx's spine, and she hit the ground, and then I shot her again. But that is something that everyone needs to understand. If you knock an animal off of its feet with a bow and arrow, you need to shoot it again.
Oh yeah,
absolutely immediately.
So I think
even if you're crying,
even if you're crying, someone's speaking out of a memory.
Yeah.
Sorry, Easton.
It's okay.
Yeah, that was tough. Well, I think one thing this is just a good note for people out there that we've experienced. If you shoot a deer and you are aiming it like the heart and you think you hit them perfect, you think you hit them absolutely perfect, but the deer's not dead, you probably armpitted the deer. So I think that's got to be one of the most common calls we get, don't you think?
We can go ahead and do a highlight reel of my deer.
Yes. So if you hit them low, well, let me back up. If you hit them where you think is perfect and you believe you hit them in the heart, but you were out, and this is more for people that are hunting out of a tree stand.
I was going to say, tree stands where this happens.
Yes, out of a tree stand. I get
there.
At least a dozen calls a year from guys telling me I hit him good, but I got down, I looked at blood, and I have blood for 150 to 200 yards, and then it runs out, and I can't find anything. So, but he's got to be dead because I hit him good. Well, is what probably happened is one, due to the angle, it looked like you hit him perfect because the fletchings, you see those fletchings or your lighted knock or whatever go in there, and it's angled up, and so you think that you hit that deer right in the heart. What really happened is if you're 20 feet up or 25 feet up, the point of impact on where that arrow actually hit is probably 3 or 4 inches below where you really thought it was, and you went right underneath the heart, and you came out the bottom of him. And if you do that, the deer is going to be just fine. That's the good thing about hitting them low compared to hitting them high. You don't have to worry about it. You don't need to be nervous. That deer is not going to be, he's going to be just fine. To show back up
sure
on camera.
That it's an armpit hit, not.
Yeah, you need to do your due diligence. You need to really look for blood, because that's the other thing I'll tell you is after what Dad was talking about on Mom's incident, if you think that, but that deer doesn't go over and die right away, but you start following blood, and you have blood, and you have blood, and you have blood for the entire time, that deer's dead. Now, I would back out because Mom's lived for what?
By the time we finally found him dead, it was over 12 hours.
12 hours.
Because she shot him with you at like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And the first time that we jumped him was 4 or 5 hours later, and that was with the dog.
Right.
With the dog tracking.
Yep. So I guess to give you guys an insight. So Mom and I went hunting. We shot this deer at first light, and I thought she hit him perfect. She thought she hit him perfect. He runs 150 yards, and I was able to see him the whole time, and he just stands there, and then he beds down, but he doesn't go anywhere until lunch, and he's still there. So then I knew right away, well, obviously we didn't hit him right in the heart or in the lungs because he's not dead. I see him over there, he's bedded, he seems to be just fine. So we backed out, we managed to get out of the tree without bumping him, and then we came back later.
It's like 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and bumped him again. Anyways,
wait a minute though. That when we got him to him that time, he was laying flat on the ground, legs out. Dan walks right up on him, sniffs his face. I pull the dog back and tell him, good boy, we're done here. And then I saw the deer blink.
Oh boy!
And
I was like,
you need like some
it's like a
music
horror
with
film.
that.
Yeah, I was like, this is not good.
He's coming back.
So I had at the time we had one of our cameraman guys with him. I asked him to hold Dan. I don't want Dan to get kicked or anything, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to finish this deer off because I don't have any weapon.
When bucks fight back.
Well, and it didn't take long to have to figure that out, other than by the time I turned around and was going to step toward the deer not only got up, but it got up and took off running like it was not even hit. But I could see blood coming out of it the moment it had started doing that. And so I was like, okay, just let him go, and we'll put the dog back on him. I wasn't afraid we were going to lose the deer, but I knew that it wasn't normal for that deer to be laying flat on the ground like that.
Right.
That is really weird.
All I can think of now is like an epic movie film a scene where like there's this close up and this deer's eye opens, and then it's like all red in it.
Well, the only
And
thing,
he just
imagine
Kill Dad.
Yes.
imagine if it had been Mom. It was her deer. The only reason is she wasn't there right that moment. If you remember, she'd had surgery.
Yeah.
She couldn't walk.
Right.
So she could barely get to a tree stand to hunt. So we were tracking the deer. But had she been there, I would have said, grab your deer, let's take a picture. And then you go over and lift his head up, and then he rams his head through your I mean, someone could have seriously gotten hurt there. That's
kind of scary, actually.
Yeah, so that whole thing of walking up and poking him in the eye is a good idea,
Or the butt.
Maybe stay away from the head.
I poke them in the eye. I take something and touch their eye, and I stay back when I do it because I mean,
he's waiting for one to wake up again.
Yeah, well, when that one,
I just RKO him. I just
So-
find the nearest tree.
but
Just to make sure.
so anyhow, to finish that though, long story short, we gave the deer a few more hours. We tracked the deer, and then it started raining. We put Dan on, and we found the deer about 11 o'clock that night. She had made one slice into the heart of that deer. That's it. One blade had actually nicked the bottom of the heart, and so the deer was bleeding out. It couldn't clot.
And if I remember right, it was like dead center of the heart, right? Like in the middle.
It was
But
in the
at
middle,
the
but it
very
was just at the
bottom.
very bottom, and it was just one slight cut. I mean, we were extremely careful when we took that deer, before we gutted that deer to look and see why was this deer still alive? Why was it bleeding the whole time? And what had happened?
Yeah.
No lung whatsoever. So it was strictly a heart shot.
Yep. What else are we talking about?
Well, the other one, flip them around, and because
Because the Texas
the
heart
Texas
shot.
heart shot. I mean, I still see people, and I've done it again back before I really felt like that I needed to treat these animals better. I guess I tried this because I had the shot. He was standing 15 yards away, perfectly straight away, nice buck. I'm going to be able to kill this deer, and I put it square right on his tail and launched an arrow. It went in 12 to 18 inches, if I remember right. It's been a long time. And blood squirted over 10 feet in the air. It was the most disgusting. And he didn't go 15 yards, and he was stone cold dead. But I hit him absolutely perfect as far as hitting him in the femoral artery. It went directly just underneath the hole of his tail, his butthole, and just went straight in. It was sticking up. And it was so gross when I walked over because I shot him first thing in the morning. As I'm walking over there, I'm like, what's on my jacket? What I didn't realize, it was blood dripping out of the trees, dripping onto my jacket. Oh, yeah. But
insane.
So it's a very lethal shot. If I had to have a follow-up shot or something like that I needed to take, it is 100% lethal.
If you hit
We're
it.
just talking about
But it's not ethical.
odds of
Probabilities.
And that's why I would teach anyone and tell everyone, I've never done it since then, even though I saw the effects of it. It's just not a highly probable shot.
Well, that is even smaller than your frontal shots.
Absolutely.
Well, I think too, honestly, I'm trying to think back of, I think that a lot of people don't realize that they're going to get an opportunity. I think that they have an elk or a deer or something at 15 yards and he's facing right at them, and they're panicked that I'm not going to get a shot at this. He's not going to give me the
Or you're not going to get
angle I
another
need.
shot.
Right, or you're not going to get another shot. But I'm trying to think back right now, and I can't think of too many. My point is, if you wait, the chances that you do get a good shot, broadside or quartered away, are pretty dang good. Because I can't think of one right now off the top of my head where I didn't get an animal because of an angle. I'm sure there's a few, but I can't think of one that was like that's traumatized me.
Well,
Well,
I can give you an example, not you, but Mom last year on KB, she doesn't shoot because he's quartered two at 20. The one time she said she had him there,
But
he was
too
quartered.
far, and he was moving.
She said that she says on camera that at one point he was 22 yards, something like that. He was close enough.
Yeah, but he was walking the whole time.
I thought he stopped. And she was like, because she was already at full draw, she thought about shooting and didn't.
Yeah, he was walking the whole time though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that deer was not. He never stopped moving.
That also comes down to body language, though, being able to read body language as far as knowing that you're going to get another shot or get an angle to understand how comfortable, especially with elk.
Well,
Like if they're coming into a call, how comfortable they are, how like you can kind of predict what they're going to do depending on their body language if you get good enough at reading it. And with a whitetail, depending on the reason that they're coming in or if they're just coming by. That's partly why you set your stands in certain situations, because you know that they're going to be coming from a certain way, certain area, and you can already kind of set yourself up for a broadside or a quartering away shot.
Well, I would tell you, elk, you're more reliant on your partner than you are yourself, because if you really know what you're doing, the way that you've taught us and what we've had with elk, we're always pulling those bulls past us.
You're not calling the bull to someone. You're
right. So I could see for the guy who's trying to has to call for himself.
Makes it tougher.
You're going to probably have a lot more difficulties with getting a really good broadside shot, because elk, a lot of times they're going to come right at you if they're super fired up, they're not trying to go downwind or anything like that. But for the ones where when you have somebody calling for you, most of the bulls that you've called for me, I mean, it works like, oh yeah, when it works perfect, and they come right by broadside.
That's a whole nother podcast, because that's the tip of the day. Don't ever go elk hunting by yourself, and you'll see you're going to be not 50% more successful because there's two of you. You're going to be 50 times more successful.
Yeah, if you're calling, if that's the
strategy you're using.
John last year, that bull, he couldn't have done that any more perfect for me. I mean, 25 yards, broadside, huge open window. Bull was going to kill him.
Okay, so but then there's several more here, I think. Laying down.
No.
Laying down, and people just don't realize how hard. Now, other than a follow. Now, again, I want to make sure that I clarify that.
Follow-up shots are completely different.
Yeah, follow-up shots, pretty much, if I feel like I have an animal that I have wounded significantly, I may not know whether I double lunged him, single lunged him, liver shot him, gut shot him. The moment that I feel like that I have hurt an animal significantly, then my objective then is to get as many arrows in him as I can.
Yeah, let her fly.
Let her fly.
Just to put it out of its misery.
Absolutely.
Because you just want to keep shooting it.
But bedded animals, like spotting and stalking something and shooting it while it's laying in its bed, it's just a freaking really risky opportunity, because their shoulder is designed to cover their vitals when they're laying down. And so what you see a lot of times is that someone will hit one and they'll jump up. Boy, when they jump up, it doesn't look like they hit them anywhere near where they were aiming when they shot them laying on the ground.
Yep.
It looks totally different. And so, again, bedded shots along with frontal shots and straightaway shots are just off the board. They just shouldn't exist in a archery person's repertoire.
We even cover shooting them in the head?
And well, we get every year I get someone that with a bow and arrow tells me they shot him right in the neck.
I was gonna say the neck or the head.
Neck or the head, and it's just not a highly, it's just not a high probability shot.
I also now maybe this is out of pocket, but like a headshot, obviously, if you can put it in the right spot, it's gonna kill him super fast. But I think it's flat out disrespectful, honestly.
Well, I think the biggest thing we're talking about here is we're trying to look at everything, every shot that we take, every scenario, every instance from the animal's perspective, okay? Because we heard a podcast the other day, too, where guys were talking about, well, not everybody has time to hunt all season. That may be true. But basically they justified taking worse shots because of limited time. And
if you have limited time and you can't get the right shot, you don't get a shot.
Yeah, that's just not fair to the animal to say, well, since I got to be at work on Monday, I might stick an arrow in your rear just because I don't have another shot. So I'm going to make my arrows heavier to try to get through your rear end. That's BS. We have to look at that from the animal's perspective of we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that animal never even knows that we shot it, to try to be as ethical as possible. And shooting one in the head is just stupid because, two, a deer doesn't have to do anything to move his head, and you miss and you hit him in the mouth or in the eye or whatever else. You're just being selfish at that point if you're trying to shoot stuff in the head, especially with a bow. It's just stupid.
We're just looking at the lowest risk shot is broadside or quartered away, and that's what. And I mean, we teach to the kids that we teach in camp. Can you get lucky and hit one in the neck and kill it? Yes, you can get lucky and hit one in the liver, and they die super quick.
Get lucky and hit one in the butt.
I've seen
hit the artery.
Well, I've seen one shot in the foot and died from a bullet, never with a bow. But I saw one that out in Montana at Whalen's shop. He's like, you got to see this because it's the only hole in this deer, and it was a mule deer. and someone had shot it just right by not in the shoulder. We're not talking about up in the body. We're talking about in the leg, and the deer was stone cold dead laying there at the meat locker.
I hope so if he got into the meat locker.
Hit the artery?
It had to have hit something or a vein or something that couldn't clot and bled out.
Yeah. Well,
that's interesting.
We're not saying bad shots aren't going to happen either, because they absolutely are. We're just talking about trying to mitigate them. So that would be one thing.
We are also clarifying big game animals, because if we're talking about headshots
on a squirrel
or turkeys,
or a turkey is what I was referring to.
The liver, I think the liver could be a good one to talk about too, because I feel as though we've learned quite a bit about the liver in the last 2 years, 3 years, as far as shot placement. If you hit them in the liver, this is more towards recovery, I guess. I have a theory now that comes from our youth camps when we do we call it the water shoot, where you take 2 Ziploc bags and you put them on a pendulum, and then the goal is to try to dump the other person's. Well, you're trying to get your end to go up, so you're trying, your end to go up. You're trying to hit the Ziploc bag with water full of it, so you're trying to hit the bag as low as you possibly can, so that the pendulum goes down on their side. So
I think that's
only reason that makes
way you could have possibly described that.
Because you don't understand the word pendulum?
No, because you couldn't get it out.
I think you say teeter-totter. It's on a teeter-totter, and you're just trying to knock the water out on your side. The other person's goes down. Yours goes up. You win.
Well, holy cow. That was so much easier. It makes sense.
Okay. Well, what happens, though, when they hit the bag at the top of the bag?
Then one of them leaks a little bit, and it starts to go one way or the other.
Right.
It doesn't leak all the way out.
But yes. So where we're going with that is, my theory is they'll tell you, you hear a bunch of people say, and I agree with them to an extent, if you hit a deer in the liver, you should give them overnight at least. That's what they tell you, 12, 18 hours, something like that. And I think that's true, unless you hit them in the bottom of the liver, because all your liver does is it has all the blood of the body.
It's really vascular.
And it holds blood for the body. When you hit them in the bottom of the liver, I think that it's like the water shoot. I think that immediately all the blood is out of that deer, and they are dead in no time. Juice. So Juice was a really interesting one, because we had snow on the ground, and for those of you listening that don't know, Juice is a deer my dad killed 2 years ago. We just had a fresh snow, only about an inch or so. He shoots Juice, hits him a little bit back, and hits him what we believe to be right dead center of the liver. Blood went everywhere immediately, just gushing blood. So we get down. Dad's nervous about it. We look at the blood, and there's blood all over the place.
Yeah, we could see it for 50 yards.
It was morning, so we're like, you know what? Let's just go. We'll make ourselves. We'll get lunch. We'll relax. We'll try and just get ourselves to wait a few hours before I think we even went to town or something like that, just to try to keep ourselves from going and looking for him. So long story short, we go back and we start on the blood, and we have just loads of blood for about another 100 yards.
100 yards maybe.
And then it's completely gone. All of the blood is gone, and we're. I think you were kind of panicked.
Oh yeah,
I was pretty freaking confident that.
Well, we have snow on the ground and no blood, and I'm like, what? And no deer.
And tons of blood before.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
And so it was highly confusing.
And so then it is what happened, or what I believe happened. I went over the hill, and Juice was dead right there. Probably only got another 50 yards?
If even that.
50 yards or so from the last blood. He didn't make it very far. So what I believed happened, especially after we gutted him, the only thing you hit, I think, was liver, wasn't it?
Yep, dead center.
Right in the middle of the liver, towards the lower third of it, that all of the blood, you cut such a huge hole in him that all of the blood was already out of him within 100 and some yards, and he just managed to make it, 180.
Just adrenaline carried him.
And he was dead. Now, the thing about it, though, is he definitely had died right away, because he was stiff as a board. So, and that only thing that was hit there was the liver. But now I think that you clip the top of the liver or something like that, and you may be in for a long wait, because he's still able to function. He's still able to get some blood in there. I think the longest one we saw was Jess Hoffman shot that antelope in Wyoming, and she hit one lung and liver, and he made it like 18 hours or something like that.
He made it a long time. And there was no way to get close to him to finish him off without the risk of spooking him off.
Right.
But I shot. No, I mean, we should. I guess no shot angle would not be appropriate if you didn't talk about gut shots. Gut shots, honestly, don't worry me so much because I know that animal is dying.
Yep.
I know they're going to die. And maybe it's since we got Dan and we have a dog that can track them, I now know that I'm looking for a dead deer. However, I have seen them alive over 18 hours later.
I've seen it over 30 now.
Yeah.
Something, it's 32, I think.
But a deer that was recovered, but it was still alive.
Yeah, they found him 48 hours later.
Right.
Was that this year?
Yeah, that's when I went with the hunting public guys to. He'd gut shot one of his deer, and when I was there, it was a solid 24 hours. 24 hours, and Dan struggled hard to get because there was like hardly any blood, and the only thing we finally got to the end where I couldn't get Dan to take a track anymore, and I found one bed where it was like fresh blood.
Which Dan had taken you to that, right?
Got me to there, and it was all fresh blood, and we're like, he had to have been, like, it was pretty apparent that he was there within 30 minutes, and we busted him, and that was 24 hours after the initial shot, and then they ended up finding him the following day.
Yeah, because you guys backed out at that point and said,
because
okay.
we're like, holy cow, I think he's still alive 24 hours later. They ended up finding him the next day.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the one I'm referring to, I shot in Illinois one year, and the deer, I shot him back, came into a decoy. And when I shot him, I knew I screwed up. I hit him too far back, but mid-body. I mean, I knew I was guts, maybe some liver, and he took off running, and we ended up finding that deer. I shot him at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on that evening, and it snowed and rained. And then 3 of us came back to look for him the next day, and about 8 o'clock, guy hollers, I got him, and he was still, and again, he was blinking. He was still alive. And so we're looking at 12, 16 hours later from a gut shot that deer was still alive. So, but my point is they're going to die. Anyone out there that thinks that if you go up to your arrow and you got this green nasty stuff on it, it stinks, and you're like, oh, well, I gut shot him, he'll probably be okay because I think it was way low or whatever. They can't survive that. They're going to die of septic shock. It may take them a while, but and the best description that I can give someone for that is think about when you've ever burped and you get back up some of the bile that's in your stomach and it burns your throat. Envision that entering your body, and that's what's happening to that animal once you cut their gut on the inside.
They can be nerve-wracking, though, because they are hard to track.
For sure.
Gut shot deer, the best case scenario, in my opinion, is if you can get a gut shot deer, that he doesn't scream off and go hauling, and he kind of just saunters and takes his time, where that you're going to have at least a general vicinity to be able to get close to. And then if you have a dog that you can put on him, that would be
ideal
best case scenario.
But the biggest one we all face it, we face it every year, turkey season, deer season, elk season, I don't care who you are, is you shoot something and it runs out of sight. Do I go look for it or not? And that is a case by case. It's always different. It's always different. But if you think that animal is not dead immediately and that you're trying to get another shot at them, don't go.
When in doubt, back out.
Yeah, just wait and give them time.
That picture I was just looking at, was one that Christo tracked, 48-hour track, or like 48-hour-old track. The guy had hit it 3 times prior. One of them, I wasn't, or I guess that when he gutted it, I didn't see where we didn't pull it all out. But one of them was, I don't know how it wouldn't have hit guts. One of them was like in a leg, and the other one flat out missed. So he had 2 arrows in him, and 48 hours later, he was still alive when we found him. And then he had to shoot him again and finally killed him. But the one arrow, obviously the one, like I said, was in the leg, but the one that he had hit it with was like mid-body, and the deer was not doing good at all. Like, it probably would have died, but I don't think it had to have been in the guts. But that's 48 hours.
Arrow still in him? Arrow come out?
Yep.
Yeah, the will to live from a wild animal is pretty substantial, and they'll do just about anything they can to try to survive that. But so I think to summarize what we're talking about is we do believe there is a no man's land. I think that would be number one.
Well, I think it depends on the definition.
Well, but
I'm going to disagree with the definition. I think there is no man's land below the spine as well. The spine's too close to the top of the back for it not to be.
I'm saying I'm indifferent for now until I do further research.
Here's what I guess I'll clarify. I call no man's land what is above what I know is the good part of the shoulders, where if I hit them there, I'm killing them. Somewhere up in there, I don't know whether it's above or below, but I can tell you right now, I've seen a lot of people lose a lot of deer and have long tracks because they get a lot of blood from arrows in that area, and then they don't ever find that animal. So I do believe there is some form of a no man's land. I do believe that there's no reason for someone archery hunting to take a straight on or a straightaway shot. I think we should, or quartering too. I think we should be looking for a quartered away or broadside shot. And yes, does that mean going to what you said earlier, Easton? Does that mean that sometime you're going to go home without killing an animal, even one that you spent a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, or you just, I'll use my lifelong goal has been to kill an Alaskan moose. And I just can't go there and shoot one in the front shoulder intentionally because I only have this one chance to do this, because I'm probably going to get to go one time in my life if I ever get to go. I can't do that. I have to go into that knowing that moose doesn't deserve that, because the worst thing
it's no different. It's called holding yourself accountable. It's no different than just not getting a shot in the first place. I don't see it as I missed an opportunity if it doesn't turn the right way. Just there was no shot.
Yeah, there's no shot.
It's not make it happen just to launch an arrow.
Yep.
So, and as well as the shoulder theory. Well, it's not even a theory anymore. It's the anatomy.
Absolutely.
The misplaced.
It's just a misconception. We've just drawn a straight line where it's not necessarily straight.
Yeah.
That's
the straight line up from the back of the leg is not necessarily.
Yeah. So let us know on that, because I'll be curious to see if everybody else had the same idea.
I think some people haven't really said much about it, because I've watched people hit him there. You got to know that you're not blowing through a straight up shoulder plate as well as they do in some of them.
I just wonder where that concept came from, that whole thing was shoulder.
Well, I think it was an easy reference.
You can see it. I think that's why.
Yeah, the muscle and everything,
and the crease in the.
Yeah,
you can see the whole shoulder when it moves. You'll see the whole thing. It looks like the plate.
I agree with, like, the knuckle gives you a good thing to aim at. I mean,
the knuckle,
you should be shooting at the knuckle, but the area, I'm just wondering if that was taught somewhere, or why we think that.
I don't know. I guess that's my fault. I must have taught you guys that when you were young.
Well, it's everybody. Everybody's. You learn that in hunter education and everything too.
Well, right there's the anatomy, and it's showing exactly what we're talking about right there.
Yeah, and that one I don't think is exactly accurate, but the 3D model we have is.
The vital zone is extremely accurate. All right. Well, I hope that kind of muddled the waters tremendously for you, or actually we cleared the water for you.
What is the Harry Potter reference? Muggle.
I don't know. We started this podcast
10
with
points to
Gryffindor.
No idea what they were talking about, and we're going to end it with no idea what they're talking about. So
10 points to raised hunting.
I think we should. You guys, I want to do a call-in section. Maybe we call it like dad disses or something, where all you guys that hunt with your dads, you call in and you call in and talk to East and I, and you get to diss your dad or something. Or maybe we'll ask you 2 questions.
Or like your biggest pet peeves.
The most annoying thing about hunting with your dad, and then the best thing about hunting with your dad.
Where do the dads fall?
Yeah, but we're going to
make one for you guys.
If you'd listen, he's got the second half of the proposal here.
And then we're going to make another one where all you dads out there can call in and you can diss your kids. So you get to talk to David, and you guys can diss on us, and you diss on your own kids or something. Let me know if you guys like that idea, and if so, we'll figure out how to let you guys call in, and we'll add that little segment to the podcast.
We have that capability. We can actually have people call in. I think our production guys have already said that it's a possibility.
Well, we got to make sure people care about it first.
Yeah.
Make sure you guys actually want to call in.
All right. So we just wanted to say thank you. And, again, we've picked topics that we feel like, whether they're topics that are hard to discuss, admitting to who knows if thousands of people, hundreds of people, or tens of thousands of people listen to this podcast, and you're telling people, hey, I wounded an animal and I lost it, or this happened or that happened. Man, if you can't be honest with everyone else, or if you can't be honest with yourself, who else can you be honest with? And what we're trying to do is show people that we've made mistakes, and the mistakes that we've made have led to things, though, that where we don't continue to make them. And so that's what we're trying to pass on. And so anyhow, we appreciate you guys and appreciate the people that are starting to comment and call in and write in and tell us what you think of the podcast. So we truly appreciate you, and we hope that you'll stick with us until next time. So from the Raised Hunting crew, peace out.